We're holding now Parshas Terumah, Sichah, first Sichah in Chelek Chof Aleph. Ois Hei, V'habir Bazeh. When again the Zman von Ashtoas Hashchin Lamata gefunden in Midrashim 2 days. In regards to when the Shechina actually came down and resided into this world, we find in the Midrashim two opposing opinions. Leut ein Maimer Chazal hat sich das aufgetan beim Matan Teira. Was demalt Botel Hagzere Rishena, Omer hatachtenim Yalul Yenim, Vel Yenim Yardul Tachtenim. Va'ani HaMaschel, Shenemar Vayerd Hashem al Har Sinai. One opinion holds that the Shechina came into this world by and was accomplished by the giving of the Torah. As the Medrash says, that Hashem was mevatel the gezerah of Elyenim and Tachtenim not having a connection one to another. And like Hashem says, Vani HaMaschel, I am going to be the first one to come down on Har Sinai. Uksiv ve'el Moshe Omar Ola el Hashem. And then it says that Moshe went to Hashem. When an andere Ort zogen Chazal, in another place Chazal say that Emasai Shor Sahashchina Ba'aretz B'yem Shehukam HaMishkan. Another place says that when was the Shechina? When did it come down? The day that the Mishkan was erected. So the question is, did the Shechina come down by Matan Torah, or did the Shechina come down by the Mishkan? Zog the Rebbe, move on, as Mar Omer Chodo, Mar Omer Chodo, V'lei Pligi. Both opinions are not arguing. Why? The Hashtaras Hashchina by Matan Torah is given, Val Ani HaMaschel V'yered Hashem al Har Sinai. The Hashtaras Hashchina which came by Matan Torah, that was because Hashem came down on Har Sinai. It started from Hashem. The Baal Das is given Mitzad L'Mayla. Since this was started Milmayla, is the Riber, therefore, Chachas B'Shas Maise, when Yered Hashem al Har Sinai, is Kol Hanigea Bahar Moisumas. So even though that when Hashem actually came down, they were commanded that anybody who touches the mountain will die. This is the Kedusha in them Gashmi from Har Sinai. So, as self-understood, there's holiness on Har Sinai, and therefore Kol Hanigea Bahar Moisumas. Is Aber B'Mshei Chayevel. We know after the blasts of the shofar were blown, that a siman Sidu Shechina is Hei Meyala Bahar. That after the shofar was blown, this was a sign that the Shechina now left, and now they can go on Bahar. The Har Sinai is geblieben, the freer Chayil, Har Sinai now remained Chayil. In other words, there was Kedusha there, but the Kedusha did not penetrate enough that the Kedusha stayed. That's by Matan Torah. Mashenkin the Ashtos Hashchina b'Mishkan is gekommen durch v'asuli Migdash. Aide Asiyas b'nei Yisrael with the pasuk is das madgish oich by proti HaMishkan ha'kelim v'asu es HaMishkan taseh chuli. So Mashenkin, when it came to the Ashtos Hashchina, that came through the avodah of the Yidden, as it says v'asu, and they made, and you should make. Uvibad the Ashtos Hashchina is gekommen durch Asiyas ha'adam. So since the Ashtos Hashchina came through the asiyah of the person, is the kedusha nikba gevarnin that chefza geshem for the mishkan. So the chefza now, the object of the mishkan, actually was permeated with kedusha. This is gevarna kedusha in the mishkan v'chelkov. There became a kedusha in the mishkan and its parts. So if you phrase this in the way Chassidus terminology, the ashras hashchina b'shas matan Torah is given mitzad l'mayla. The ashras hashchina which came by Matan Torah, that was Mitzad L'Mayla. V'ani HaMaschel, Shenemar V'yed Hashem al Har Sinai. V'bal, das der Mechaven von Elyenim Yardul Tachtenim. Is as Tachtenim Yalul Elyenim, since the purpose of why the Shechina came down, why the Elyenim came to the Tachtenim, is in order that the Tachtenim should be Yalul Elyenim, Velt Zol Veren Adir Le Yisbarech. When the Mayla is doch ein Keach Chaser Pel, we know by the Eibishter that the potentiality and actuality, it goes hand in hand. So the Tachtenim now became a dir for Hashem. Was the Frage findet as the Keil von der Seres Adibris gekommen von alle Dal Ruchas Elam. In Shemayim V'Aretz, that's what we find, that the Keil of the Seres Adibris came from all the four parts of the world. The Hainu as Welt hat Aroz gestiegen dem Inyan von Anecha Hashem Leikecha. Kedusha was permeated into the world. The idea of Anecha Hashem Leikecha. The Shloimy Sakavan is Aber. So even though by Matan Torah there was Kedusha and very, very high Kedusha, it permeated the whole world. Nevertheless, the completion of the Kavanah is, as the Tachtenim soll werden adire zum Eberster nicht nur durch den Peil, was wird mit Zad Keche Yisparich, was ist nicht Chaser Peil. So the ultimate kavanah is not that the dira should be made by Hashem, which we know by Hashem ain't keach chaser payil. But rather, what's the ultimate? When it's nach aber nito der kav shalei basiyas tachtin. Nor, as will sein, a payil was wird getan durch dem tachtin. Hashem wants that we, with our avodah, we should work and make sure that the tachtin down into this world should be a dir betachtenim. As the Adam Babidase, so from Elam Haza Machan Adirle Yisbarach, the person himself should make a dir betachtenim. And das is the uftu von Mishkan and Gabi Mantera. And this is the advantage, this is the accomplishment of the Mishkan over Mantera. As the Veshachati Besechem haben jeden Mamshach gewinnt durch sehr Avodah durch Vasuli Mikdash. That the accomplishment of the Mishkan over Mantera, that Veshachati Besechem, that Yidden were able to be payal through Vasuli Mikdash. Und damit wird verstandig der Tam, was der Pasuk is macht in der Ingen von Likkutei Teruma. Now we can understand why the Pasuk prefaces with first Likkutei Teruma before it tells me about building. Weil as der Ingen, as a Shos Hashchina b'Mishkan kommt durch der Aveda von Yidden drückt sich aus in dem Ingen von Teruma, because if you want to understand what does it mean the Aveda of the Mishkan, Vasuli Mikdash, that's expressed in the word Teruma, as we will explain. Vav, Teruma hat zwei Teitchen. Teruma has two explanations. Pirish Rashi says Teruma means hafrasha, you're separating. And another explanation, the Zohar says Teruma means harama, you're picking it up. Die zwei Pirushim seien verbunden zebeze, seien nicht nur masber as die harama von Welt, wenn Yonel, Zav, Chesed, V'gemer, Tzvalikus, tut sich auf durch hafrasha Sodom. So these two explanations, that either means separation or lifting up, so not only do they explain that in order to lift it up, this is done through separating, the person separating, nor they actually express how the Avodah and Aliyah are done. Der Wort Teruma hafrashas madgish as nichts als was hat geht der Adam weg. Teruma means he's separating. What does that express? Not everything he has, he gives away. Scheit ab atel von seinen Nechosim und das made him geht weg oben zum Ebersten Lilishmi. So what does he do? He says he takes away a little bit that he has, and he gives it to Hashem. That is the idea of Teruma Lidishmi. Interesting to note, by Teruma we know there's three different types you can give: 1/40th, 1/50th, and 1/60th. Teruma Li is Begamatria 40. The ultimate Teruma is to give one out of every 40. Fine. Back in the Pnim, und es ist da achillik zwischen die zwei Fanem Hashros Hashchina now. There's a difference between the Hashros Hashchina. B'shas, das Wort wird Nimshach Mitzad L'mayla v'Iman Teda. When you have the Shchina, which is Nimshach Mitzad L'mayla, is the Hashros Hashchina b'Efen Shava b'Chol K'Elam. So the Shchina is now equal in the entire world. Mashenkim, when the Hashros Hashchina wird aufgetan durch der Avodah Pulasei HaTachtin Amata. However, when the Hashros Hashchina is accomplished through the Avodah of the person, is der chiluk lefi dargas nediv liboy und das is beseder v'hadraga. So then it comes and it's related to the person who's actually giving, and that is in an ordinary fashion. Min hakal el hakavid tachtenim was nid bottle tzolikus. First you start with the tachtenim, which is not nullified to Hashem. Und der yid bavidos is mafresh von zei tafastem oder beloy tafasta. So then a yid now is mafresh from himself. Achelak von Welt und das made him. So he mafreshes it. And then he picks it up. He picks it up to Hashem. Then he goes from level to level. And then he goes and he separates it and he uplifts it part of the world. Until eventually the whole chelik now becomes a dira for Hashem. And that's the difference between when you have a revelation, Mamayla Lamata and Mamata Lamayla. Mamayla Lamata, it's not a Seder V'Hadraga. It's not ordinary fashion. So Hashem comes, He gives you a Gilei, and everything is refined, but it's not coming from your Avodah. It's not the Kav Shaloi. Mashenkin, when it comes to Hashras Hashchina, which is Hashras Hashchina, which is accomplished through the Tachta and the Mata, that has to do with the person giving it. So then he goes from Minakal Elakavid. First he starts with making with the Avodah down over here, and then eventually he prepares the whole world for Dir B'Tachtenim. The Chile Kanal is nicht nur in der Seder von Habir V'Aliyah von Welt, nor das drückt sich aus and an oifen habitul was ashar shechina is pale. So not only is this done is the ordinary fashion in akal kovid, but also it expresses how, with what the ashar shechina is affected. Then does kum mitzala maila pale does habitul mitzias elam. So when you have the gile, when you have the revelation, which comes the maila, so that's pale habitul mitzias elam. But the gile shechina git nit kein ort for mitzias versus nitalikus, because when you have the shechina milmaila, that does not give any room for mitzias, which is not Hashem. Kumar Chazal by Mantera Sipur like Tzavach Sherle no like God, like it says by Mantera, the Medrash says a bird did not scream, did not chirp, a shade, an ox did not gore, did not roar. Shenki der bitum mitzad Shos Shchinavas vert ufketam mitzad Avedis Pelas Ha'adam. Shenki when it comes to the bitum and from the Shos Shchinah, when it's the pool of the person, befrat b'tchilas aveda when mehaped on bein the mishkan, especially in the beginning when we start building the mishkan, this is blaze and in from afrasha. So you only have the idea of separation, and then from zayin mitzias and get this up is thus made him. So by taking from his own mitzias and he lifts it up, hecher von sich zum ebersten. So by taking things that belong to him, he's uplifting it to Hashem, but he doesn't make it bottle. Only Hashem, when he has a revelation through the Gila Ashkina, he can be mevatel the mitzias, which is neged elikus. However, when it comes to the person, when the person's own aveda, like the hafrasha, by him separating it and he's lifting it to Hashem, but he doesn't make that thing bottle to Hashem, doesn't make it a ois mitzias. Oh, so let's see. In mer klostik oisians, if you want to use general terms, by man what happened? Bitla tachten. The tachten now became bottle. By siyas mishkan, when it came to the making of the mishkan, his dachus tachten, the tachten now became refined. Zayin. Und das ist der Tam, was die Teire rechnet ist, die alle Yud Gimel Tasva Prati Hadvarim was in the Terumah from Lechas HaMishkan. And that's why the Teire, we asked before, why does the Teire now enumerate either the 13 or 15 different materials that were used in the Mishkan, and why does the Teire B'chalal have to tell us this? It was only Avodah Lefisha. So the Rebbe says, weil an Avodah Sa'odem zu machen von die Inyone Ha'olam Adir Le'Yisbarich is the Avodah V'aliyah von jeden Chedek von Welt is an andere Oifen. When a person is trying to make this Dir B'tachtenim, every single Yid and every single Chelek is going to be different. He says, Abazunda Sor Teruma, it's a different type of Teruma. Sai Afrasha and Sai Baharama. Sai when you're separating and when you're trying to uplift. Pisa is moving was the Teira is makdim. So that's why the Teira is mefar these pratim, because in Avedas there's different Avedas. Pisa is moving was the Teira is makdim and Siva v'yichuli truma far v'asli mikdash. Now we can appreciate why the Teira is makdim v'yichuli truma before asli mikdash. When was the Shema Sedrus truma, and why do we name this parsha truma? We asked before. There are 10 types of trumas. There are 10 types of trumas. How, by naming it Terumah, which the Torah only speaks about one Terumah over here, the Terumah for the Mishkan, how does that express the entire, with the word Terumah, how does that express the theme of the Parsha? Well, the Iker Inyan V'chidush from the Sedra is the Tachlis V'ndireh B'tachtenim, B'minyan HaMikdash, Mishkan, was V'ert Uvketan HaIdea V'edes U'Polas Adam. Because what's the theme of this week's Parsha? The theme of this week's Parsha is making a Mishkan, which means you're making a Direh B'tachtenim. But what type of Direh B'tachtenim? A Direh B'tachtenim which has to do with the person. It comes from the person. Was Sedra min akal lakov da frashas the Teruma on erste Nacht mekadish dafke durch dem fühlt sich aus die Stimme kommen von Bris Elam. Because how do you make a dir betachtenim? Is first you're being mafresh Teruma, and then you're being makdish the Teruma. So that's the idea. What's Teruma? Teruma in our parsha is in our parsha you're being mafresh something for the Mishkan, and then you're being makdish for the Mishkan. That's the ultimate level of a dir betachtenim, is when it comes from the avodah of the person. Das ist der Inyan Teruma. The Ashras Shchina the Afrasha Sodom Beifen Hanal. The Achli Beers is given Manter B'Sad Aveda, Mani Amask, B'Sad Aveda is und Davke Demol V'Nimshach Iker Shchina B'Tachtenim. So Davke, it's through the Shchina, it's through the Aveda of the Mishkan that can bring the ultimate level of Shchina down to this world. And the myth is Eich Muven, was he said that it hates Teruma. Now, why is the Parsha called Teruma? The Shleimus and Milo from alle Eser Trumas, because the completion of all the 10 Trumas is it's the way it's expressed in our parsha in der Terumah Afrasha V'Arama, which, like we said, first you separate, then you uplift. Is vert a mishkan, it makes a mishkan. How do you make the Shechina? What's the ultimate level of making the Shechina in the Mishkan is dafka through the Pu'ula and the Aveda of the person. Ois Ches. 3 more. There's a now we can explain how the idea of this Mishkan also, even though it was only Lefisha, but Beruchnius, it's really, which we know Torah is everlasting, is a lesson in our day-to-day life. Das was demalt hat sich angeheben der Ingen hat Teruma with the Avedas Hamata is given nicht nur der Fall was is noch man Torah. This that we started the Aveda, the idea of Teruma, the Aveda of down into this world. That came right after Matan Torah. So it's not only because it started after Matan Torah, nor the Bimshei Chayevel, the Simen Sichah Shechina, Mila hat sich schon nicht angehört begilei der Veyed Hashem Lasina, nor euch, als es given in Midbar, because it was in the desert. Mizbar Baruchni, it says on Ord B'matzav, V'la Yoshav Adam, Ha'elyin Shalak Yisisham. So start talking Yoshav Gila Likus. In the desert, which we know, the desert is a place, Baruchni, so there's no revelation of godliness. Ma'ashengen on Ir Meshiv, it's on Ord Bus is a Gila Likus. So when you say that there's a city, a residing city, that Baruchni shows that there's revelation of God. Yoshav Adam, Ha'elyin Sham, people reside there. This is the difference, also the general difference between the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash hat min aufgebeit. Nachdem wir Yidden sind gekommen, el hamenucha v'anachla. When did we start building the Beis Hamikdash? Is when the Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael and they settled there. And it says Arois from Midbar and gekommen hamakam meishav bnei Adam. When they left the desert and they came to a place of habituation. Und gebaut hat man ihm in Azah Eretz Yisrael, was auf steht, and they built the Beis Hamikdash in Eretz Yisrael, which it says, so first of all, they came to the safest land. And in Eretz Yisrael, they came to Yerushalayim on earth from Yiras Shalom. Yerushalayim is comprised of 2 words, Yiras Shalom. Shalom Masayira. Yerushalayim Atzma B'makim was is Shara Shamayim. They came to the holiest place. That's the Beis Hamikdash. Und der Ingen Hamikdash, die Dire Latzmose, was man macht von den Dvorim Tachtenim an Uftu, was kommt nicht in ganzem Mitzad Avedas Adam, nor euch Mitzad Asher Efchar. Der göttliche Bechira Kedusha, was ist dort Shera und macht, sie mehr Muchsher zu werden Aklila Likus. So, in the Beis Hamikdash, yes, it came through the Aveda of the person, but still there were certain categories and certain automatic revelations they had. It was Eretz Yisrael, it was Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim was in the place of Shara Shamayim. So that automatically they had certain advantages over the Midbar, which was the Midbar, Baruchnius desert. There's no godliness over there. In Midbar, however, when it comes to the desert, was is nicht kein Meishav Adam und es klar nicht roi zu sein Akli Likus. There's no Meishav Adam over there. And it's not the right to have Hashem over there, Badrab. It says Midbar Ha'amim. It's the desert of the nations, which means there's snakes, there's scorpions, there's no water there, which shows Baruchnius that there's like no godliness, there's nothing there. Dort is the Asiyas and Mishkan Ufmachen dort, the dear Fardam Eberstein durch Ois, Mitzad Avedas Adam, Be'efin Shal Teruma. So Dafke over there, in the desert, you make the Asiyas and Mishkan, over there expresses the ultimate level of the Avedas Adam in a way of Teruma. And therefore, Dafke min Migdash HaMidbar, Dafke from the Mikdash in the Midbar, so we take the lesson as Eichens man Gagolos, when es ist senelere ino, und unser Midbar Amim es setzt sich nicht kein Gilelikus, Sachesh Gof und Mechupel, is Eichen Azam Maim de Matzev, hat mit dem Kehr zu Bein am Mishkan, which Shachante Besechem Fardem Eberstein. So now he says very nicely, he says, the reason, what's the idea of the Mishkan in our day-to-day life? The idea of the Mishkan is that we're in a desert. Just like in the Mishkan, they built the Mishkan in the desert. So we're in a desert. We don't see godliness. And what are we doing? We're making a dir b'tachtenim. We're making a dwelling place for Hashem down into this world. That there should be ashras hashchina through the avodah of the person. Ultimately comes from the person, and that is the ultimate avodah. So when we say what's the Mishkan, how does a Mishkan relate to nowadays? The answer is that the Mishkan is. Just like the Mishkan came through the avodah of the person in the Midbar, so too we can accomplish the ultimate when we're in the midbar, in this world, when we don't see any godliness, and we make a dir betachtenim. Test. Now, but ich verstehen, that time for was the Tziva if Binyan Hamikdash learned man up from Mishkan Dafka. Now we can appreciate, we ask, Kanal Siv Daled, why do we learn the Mishkan, why do we learn the Beis Hamikdash from the Mishkan? Bald as der Uftu von Ashros Shchina B'Mikdash the man is das was wird aufgetan mit Tzadavedes Adam, since the accomplishment of Ashros Shchina in the Mikdash is accomplished through the Avodah of the person, und der Inyan is given be'igor mitzad und mer begilei mishkan shemidaber dafke, and it's more expressed dafke in the Mishkan over the Matan Torah, and their fire lantman up as das is the ikar hadgasha oich in Mikdash, because the main stress in the Mikdash is through the Mishkan, because the main Avodah came dafke in the Mishkan. Now we can appreciate why the Rambam says Mikdash Hamidbar in der Halacha v'akol chayav and livneis v'lisad ba'atzon v'meidam anoshim Mikdash Hamidbar. The Rambam says that when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, everybody is obligated to build and to give money. Mikdash Hamidbar. Why did he say like the desert? Chotches der Monadik der Mishkan in Afridik Halacha zokter nitem lashon Mikdash Hamidbar. And if you see in a previous halacha, the Rambam doesn't use the lashon in the midbar. Why? A der inyan was is da by binyan beis hamikdash livnei ulasad ba'atzman u'b'memeinam, which means avedas adam be'ifin shel teruma, that this is an aveda which comes through the person giving teruma. Nemzich fun und is bedugmas mikdash hamidbar. It takes, and it's similar to mikdash hamidbar. Asher lo yoshav adam sham. Was dort is nicht kein Ort, was hat Sheiches zu Likus. Und der Mission is gekommen geworden durch Eis, Adam. So over there, that the Avodah came dafke through the person himself. Which that, like we explained, is the ultimate level. Yud. Das ist echt der Idee von Ayin HaMishkan und Trumasse, für jeder einem, befragt in jedem Zman, was gefindt sich. So this is a lesson to from the Mishkan and the Terumah for every single person, wherever he is. Es trefft sich le'eis min ha'itim, as a Yid filled by sich, as is an amayim de matzah in midbar. Asher lo yoshev adam sham. People feel that they're in a midbar, they're in a desert, that they don't feel any sense, any spirituality whatsoever. As in the top by im Rahman al-Tzan yoshev, von kein inish b'kedusha and gatachkeit. He has nothing. He doesn't feel any godliness whatsoever. Canada mold chas v'shalom reinfallen a year. So a person can go into a depression, he can go into a loss. Zokmin im, so what does the Torah say? As is da der Mishkan Hamidbar, Mikdash Hamidbar. There was a Mishkan, there was a Mikdash in the Midbar. Vadrab, the Tzivi was the Mikdash Shechat B'Seichem hat sich angeben in Gwen Bepeil of the Mishkan for the Yidden seinen in Amayim the Matzah of Midbar. The commandment was the Mikdash came dafka where when the Yidden were in the desert, which means when the Yidden Beruchnius were in a very low state. Und durch dem was a Yid macht a Mishkan seindig in Amayim the Matzah of Midbar. So when a Yid is making a Mishkan in a place where he is in a situation that it's a desert, so through him being in the desert, there's no godliness, and he transforms that to the Midbar, the Kedusha, so the B'chinas from Kilei Adam, who was his hecher from B'chinas Adam Elyon, he comes to a level which is even higher than the Adam Elyon, because dafka through, when it's the avodah of the person, he can come to a level even higher than had he had that help, that revelation from Hashem, like it was in the Beis Hamikdash.